Peace and greetings to the East. This is the last part of this particular series. Thank God, because there are only a few parts that I have to go into. Thank God. All right. Another point that Weston Jarvis made in the old fashioned Masonic podcast interview was uh former Prince Hall Masons coming into his jurisdiction. When I say John G. Jones Masonry, don't take offense, because I know there are a lot of John G. Jones Masons that are part of the actual original General Grand Masonic Congress, and they'll send me a message and say, like, oh, these other guys are not real John G. Jones Masons either, or whatever. Remember, I'm speaking in general terms. I understand these things 100%. I'm speaking in general when I talk about John G. Jones Masonry. But anyway, Weston Jarvis talked about former PHA Masons, like Prince Hall affiliated Masons, and in rare instances, former mainstream Masons coming to join his particular jurisdiction. I get it. I would say that in my experience in Freemasonry, both in John G. Jones Masonry when I was a young man, nowadays, with me knowing John G. Jones Masons, and also me being a co-mason for the majority of my Masonic career, I would say it's a fact that individuals who leave Prince Hall Masonry, whether it's Prince Hall affiliated or Prince Hall origin or whatever, they leave sometimes, yes, that's a fact, and go and try to join another Masonic organization. That happens. With the memes in the interview, I think that one of the memes that was shown was something that tried to like hint at, I think, only like or mostly expelled or suspended Prince Hall Masons try to join John G. Jones Masonry. That's not true. Trust me, I know that's not true. It has nothing to do with being expelled for the most part. That can happen, but that's not what it is. Sometimes individuals literally leave Prince Hall affiliated PHA Prince Hall Masonry for numerous reasons. I can guarantee you this. Because sometimes they feel they're not being nourished in terms of Masonic knowledge, and they'll leave. Sometimes they could feel that PHA Prince Hall Masonry is too Christian in a sense of attending rituals, whether it's a cornerstone laying ceremony, a tiled lodge meeting, and the name Jesus Christ is mentioned, and they're like, "Oh, these are actual Christians." I'm coming into Freemasonry because I want to learn esoteric knowledge. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Muslim. None of that. And number two, Masonic lodges are not supposed to, traditionally, I don't care what jurisdiction we're talking about, traditionally, a Masonic lodge is not supposed to promote an exoteric religion, which would be Judaism, Christianity, Islam, so on and so forth. That that people don't come into Masonry for that. Go to the church if that's what you want to do. Anyway, that's another point that's of importance. Another thing in the interview was Weston Jarvis said that with his particular Grand Lodge, and if my memory serves me correct, he said it's Isaac Grand Lodge of Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. At least the most recent Grand Lodge that he represents. That doesn't mean he was always a part of that. It's, to my understanding, a Grand Lodge he helped organize in recent times. Fine, cool and well. So, I, if my memory serves me correct, I believe he said that to Brian. I believe he said that when that Grand Lodge was organized, it was different from the Grand Lodge of England's organization, which that concerns mainstream masonry and I guess certain other mainstream Grand Lodges, etc., that three other or three Grand Lodges sanctioned the Grand Lodge, and that somehow that makes it better. That's not a good thing to say. The reason that's not a good thing to say is because a Grand Lodge is not, at least traditionally, all around the world, traditionally, a Grand Lodge is not, this, it's good this is mentioned. Traditionally, for one, a Grand Lodge does not receive a charter. That does happen in the case of certain groups, like, for example, the National Grand Lodge of Prince Hall Origin Masonry. That's PHO. That's not PHA. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. That's PHO, which is the original Prince Hall Masonry. PHA is a break off of PHO, and but PHA is the Prince Hall Masonic organization that's recognized, generally speaking, by mainstream masonry. Generally, so don't misconstrue anything that I'm saying. So generally, in Freemasonry, generally throughout the world, Grand Lodges, generally speaking, especially when it comes to mainstream Masonry, Grand Lodges are created by a group of lodges that were chartered by a certain Grand Lodge in mainstream Masonry that wanted to create a new Grand Lodge. Now, when I say group, you may look at Masonic, like typical mainstream Masonic protocol, and believe that it has to be three lodges. That's not true. There are exceptions to the rule, many exceptions to the rule. For example, the Grand Lodge of New Jersey, mainstream in America, that Grand Lodge was not formed by any lodges. It was formed by a conference of Masons. And there are plenty of examples I could give you, but don't worry about that. That's not important. Sometimes sometimes two lodges underneath a recognized Grand Lodge have come together in a particular state to form the state Grand Lodge. I'm talking about the mainstream Grand Lodges in America. It's it's not that serious. It's, trust me, do your research and you'll see what I'm saying is correct. Anyway, when Jarvis said that three Grand Lodges sanctioned, I guess, his Grand Lodge, something that the Grand Lodge of England way back in 1717 did not do. That's not a good thing to say because you don't need Grand Lodges to create a Grand Lodge. You don't need that. Normally, whether it's mainstream Masonry or any other type of Masonic Grand Lodge, mainstream or otherwise, normally it's done by lodges that are chartered by some Grand Lodge, and they come together where there's no problem, like no Grand Lodge having jurisdiction in that territory, and then they come together and then they create the Grand Lodge. My Grand Lodge doesn't have a charter at all. My lodge does, but not my Grand Lodge. There's no charter because no Grand Lodge created it. Subordinate lodges from another Grand Lodge came together and created it. That's typically how it goes. Whatever. Don't get too focused on that, but I'm just trying to dispel like certain bad information. Uh Another thing that was mentioned in the interview was reasons for becoming a John G. Jones Mason. And like I said, there was a brother who, meaning a person, I don't mean a Masonic brother, I don't know if he's a Mason or not. He mentioned something in the comment section saying that a lot of the John G. Jones, so-called John G. Jones lodges are not even real John G. Jones lodges. And I replied to him that I understand what he's saying in the sense that there is an actual original General Grand Masonic Congress for John G. Jones Masonry. And then there are other ones that say that they're the original one. And when you deal with those types of things, you have to look at it and say, hold on, man, you're saying you're the original John G. Jones Grand Masonic Congress and you're really not. The one that's the original one, and I could tell you this because I was a John G. Jones Mason years and years ago when I was a kid, not now, years and years ago. The one that's the original John G. Jones Grand Masonic or General Grand Masonic Congress is the one that Ali Spencer, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but look up a guy named Ali Spencer, the one that he was a part of. And I'm not saying that he didn't help to establish other General Grand Masonic Congresses and that, but I'm just saying that the one that he served as the president of, that's the original one. But there are other ones that say we're the original one and so on and so forth. It's whatever. So I get that. Um, but anyway, reasons for going to John G. Jones Masonry instead of mainstream or Prince Hall or anything else. I would give you reasons, but it was mentioned in the interview on Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. The reasons that people go into that, because Brian asked it, and I know why he was asking it. The reason Brian was asking it was to say, like, do people go to your organization to petition it because they think they're us, meaning mainstream Masons? That's why Brian mentioned it. I get it. Excuse me. And Weston Jarvis gave his answer. So Weston Jarvis didn't really answer the question. Honestly, he didn't. Meaning he didn't give a transparent answer is what I'm saying. But I'll give you a good answer because I was a John G. Jones Mason when I was a kid. This is the reason why people join John G. Jones Masonry instead of mainstream Masonry or some other style of Masonry, Prince Hall Masonry or otherwise. There's several reasons. One reason would be because they thought that when they were petitioning a John G. Jones Lodge for initiation, they thought it was mainstream Masonry, right? Now, understand this also. John G. Jones Masonry is a predominantly black group. Same thing as PHA, Prince Hall affiliated Masonry. So those are typically individuals living in urban areas. I said that before, but I said it in a nice way. Like myself, I'm not black, I'm white. However, I grew up in the hood, as they would call it, the ghetto. That's how I grew up. It doesn't mean I didn't lift myself up out of those situations, but that's how I grew up. So I would live in in an urban area, generally speaking, growing up. So mostly what I would see in my neighborhood is Prince Hall Masonry or John G. Jones Masonry. Mostly, right? Even though I'm not black. So that's what you see around you. So usually when somebody's trying to join Masonry and they come into John G. Jones Masonry, they're going to be black. Usually. Not all the time, but usually. I'll give you an example. Like the guy Oscar Allen, if you ever heard of him, look him up on YouTube. He did a lecture talking about clandestine Masonry. He's from New York. He was basically a John G. Jones Mason, and then after years of being involved in that, I guess he started trying to like visit other lodges and realized like, oh, okay, there's a such thing as mainstream Masonry. And then he joined mainstream Masonry, not PHA. PHA is quasi mainstream Masonry, but it's not really mainstream, but it's quasi mainstream. Anyway, Oscar Allen joined mainstream Masonry under the Grand Lodge of New York. He's like a black guy with, meaning like an African American black guy. He got dreadlocks, a crooked eye, whatever. And he's pretty smart. But I'm giving you practical examples. So he joined mainstream Masonry. But the reason he wouldn't join mainstream Masonry back then is because he's black. It's not typically the type of neighborhood lodge you would see, is the point I'm making, right? So that's one reason. Another reason would be age. Like I told you, when I joined Masonry, I came into John G. Jones Masonry at 18 years old. Why? Because even though I went to the mainstream Masonic lodges to seek initiation, at that time, I'm talking about 2003, the year 2003, you had to be 21 years old to petition. I wasn't 21 years old, I was 18 years old. So I was kindly told, come back when you're 21 years old. I had a job, everything, no problem. However, I came across John G. Jones Masons and they explained to me, no, you could be 18 years old to join. So hence, I joined through that route. Simple, easy to understand. So that's another reason that some people would join John G. Jones lodges or lodges rather. Um, I'm just giving you the reasons why, because it came up in that interview. Another reason, which is very important, another reason would be criminal history. Facts. Nowadays, you could become a PHA Prince Hall Mason with a felony and easily get in. That's a fact. I know this. I don't want to go into that and start naming names and stuff like that. I know what I'm talking about. You could be a felon and get into Prince Hall Masonry. Nowadays, PHA, facts. Trust me, I know what I'm telling you. Same thing with mainstream Masonry. Nowadays, even though, granted, individuals will, you know, check you off of recommendations, like who do you know, stuff like that, so on and so forth. But you have to remember that these are 501c10 nonprofit corporations. Don't think nonprofit means you don't pay money to be a part of the organization. You have to pay money. So they have to pay the bills. They have to make money. So you have plenty of felons that become mainstream Masons nowadays, and PHA, Prince Hall Masons. I don't want to debate that with individuals and say, oh, you know, brother so and so, because I have his dues card. I know him. You, he's a felon. I don't want to get into that. Felons nowadays, it's easier for a felon to become a mainstream Mason or Prince Hall affiliated Mason nowadays. In the old days, it could still happen, but it was harder. I'll give you an example. And if you think I'm lying, Google is your friend. Look it up. Don King, the boxing promoter. You're familiar with him? And I'm not trying to put him on blast, because being a felon doesn't make you a bad guy. If you deal with mainstream Masonry and Prince Hall Masonry, a lot of times, but more especially Prince Hall PHA Masonry, they like to talk about the Bible, Jesus Christ, and all of that, which that should not even come into Freemasonry as a factor. But they like to use that in the lodge. Trust me. You don't believe me? Go on YouTube and look up a cornerstone ceremony with PHA Masons and see if they don't talk about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. That's not supposed to be allowed in traditional Freemasonry. But guess what? It happens. Anyway, Google is your friend. Don King, the boxing promoter, and again, I'm not disrespecting him. I'm just telling you facts if you're really about truth. Don King, the boxing promoter who promoted Mike Tyson and a number of other famous boxers. He's a felon. It's a fact. He went to prison for manslaughter. That's what he went to prison for. He's a felon. He's a PHA, Prince Hall Mason. If I'm lying, disprove me. I'm telling you the truth. He's a felon. But I'm not knocking him. I'm just telling you. Don't believe like some of the bullshit that people try to like promote to you to belittle other people. I could give you other examples, even though this is a little bit different. Nelson Mandela is a Prince Hall Mason, or he was rather. You know what I mean? He was a felon, albeit a political prisoner. But the point I'm making is I'm just giving you examples. Who are other people? But believe me, bro, there are plenty, but they're personal individuals I know that I could name to you that are felons, and sometimes nefarious felons. But that doesn't apply to like a Don King or, like I said, Don King went to prison for manslaughter. It happens. You're growing up in the ghetto. Sometimes you have to kill a person off of self-defense and stuff. I get that. Right? So the felon thing, and even with mainstream Masonry, I could go into that same argument. But the point I'm making, to go back, like my man, President Donald Trump says, it's called the weave. The weave. You say what you're saying, and then you go back around to prove your point. With John G. Jones Masonry, a lot of times the standards are less in terms of like a person that's not known to the lodge that they're petitioning. So you would probably have more felons, right? Meaning you could have a person that's let's just say like a super nefarious felon, and they get rejected off of having a felony, petitioning a mainstream lodge or a PHA lodge because they're not known. So it's like, oh, he's a felon. Oh, you got a felony? Whoop, blackball him, right? Understand what I'm saying? Whereas on the other hand, you could be J. Edgar Hoover. If you're familiar with J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover was a homosexual, well-known, very nefarious individual if you do the history on him. But he was a mainstream Mason up to the 33rd degree. Don't fall for all of the like political bullshit inside of these organizations is what I'm saying. But anyway, I'm answering the question as to the different reasons why certain people may become John G. Jones Masons instead of mainstream Masons or Prince Hall Masons. But remember, don't think when I say that because they're felons, some of them, that's it makes John G. Jones Masons bad. That's why I said Don King is a felon. And there are plenty of other ones. I don't want to go too much into it, but I'm just saying that's a potential reason. Uh Another reason, race, obviously. I was speaking to a gentleman earlier who's a pretty good guy. He's petitioning Prince Hall affiliated Masonry, PHA, and he's going to become a PHA Mason. I asked him, why didn't you join the mainstream in Pennsylvania? No, I reached out to them. They took a long time. It seems like they're brushing me off. Guess what? I can almost guarantee you that if the mainstream Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania's subordinate lodges accepted him quickly, he would join it. I could guarantee you that. This person I'm talking about, I could guarantee you. But guess what? They didn't reach out to him in time. And I had to explain to him, like, don't think that's because of racial issues. It may be because a lot of times Masonic lodges are antiquated in the protocols of processing petitions and reaching back out to you after you call them and stuff like that. It's the truth. So I didn't tell him like they rejected, like they didn't get back to you because you're black. I didn't tell him that because I know that's not necessarily the truth nowadays. It could be the truth depending upon a particular lodge. It could happen. So that could be a reason. It could be a reason. Bro, there's so many politics when it comes to mainstream masonry and so-called PHA masonry that when you're in it, you would understand it. You will certainly understand it. If you're a part of a Prince Hall affiliated lodge, ask your lodge if they would let you have dual membership with a mainstream lodge. Ask them. And I can guarantee you that in most cases, you won't be allowed to petition a mainstream lodge for dual membership. You won't be. Whereas I can guarantee you that in the mainstream, despite the little racist bullshit that does happen in the mainstream, sometimes, oftentimes, depending on what county you live in, what city you live in, what state you live in, oftentimes, um, despite that, being rejected as an actual member, in the mainstream, usually they will allow you to have dual membership. Like if you're part of a mainstream lodge, they will allow you to have dual membership. Like if you want to petition another lodge in another state or another county or another city, they'll say, okay, yeah, you could do that. But you have to pay dues to that lodge and then this lodge. Why? Because it's collective economy. That's the purpose of that. At the same time, there will be rules in place like, oh, you can't visit this lodge more than 3 times or whatever. It all depends on the jurisdiction. It's not that simple. Like idiots that think they know about masonry and just put out bad information. What I'm telling you is good information. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So with PHA masonry, 9 times out of 10, they won't allow their members to have dual membership in mainstream masonry. Why? Because it's common sense. A lot of times, though, the PHA Mason in that state, like the gentleman I'm talking about who was asking me about this stuff, I'm not going to name his name because for what? They'll say, oh, the mainstream is bigger, has a more widespread membership. Let me just go there. So they know that you could be rejected over there because of cultural reasons or whatever. But now if you become a PHA Mason and your counterpart, State Grand Lodge, recognizes you, but now you want to, let's just say, the State Grand Lodge allows you to become a dual member, they'll let you in and then you'll start visiting the lodge and say, man, what the fuck should I be a PHA Mason for? For what? I could just go here and I have a wider level of recognition. You understand? It's not that hard to understand, man. All right. But anyway, the 3 Grand Lodges sanctioning the Grand Lodge is bullshit. Whatever. That doesn't even matter. I said that before. Anyway, the reasons for going John G. Jones instead of mainstream or Prince Hall, I mentioned those reasons. I covered all of that. And also, Brian, the host of Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast, a good thing that he said to Weston Jarvis was that there is shade, and I'm quoting this because that's what he said in the interview. Brian said that he's not trying to diss John G. Jones Masonry. He said that he recognizes that there is shade. That's the term he used. Shade in all Masonic organizations. In the sense that you have scandals in mainstream masonry and PHA masonry and in pretty much all Masonic organizations, but not necessarily to the same level. But the point is, at least he was honest about that. He was just saying that to say, like, I'm not trying to dish your organization. He was just asking, like, yo, do individuals embezzle money? Stuff like that. But he was honest, Brian, the host of Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. And you have to respect that because it shows you he's not being a dickhead. He's being honest. He understands from experience. And the Brian, the host of that podcast, to my understanding, he comes from an actual long lineage of Masons in his family. Like one thing in the urban communities, you'll have people telling you all the time, my grandfather was a Mason. Almost every guy you meet, yo, my grandfather was a Mason. My grandfather was a Mason. My great grandfather was a Mason. And they're bullshit artists. Super bullshit artists. It's typical. I'm saying in the urban community. So when Brian said that, like, there's shade in a lot of these Masonic organizations. Not saying all, but probably most, because you're dealing with humans. That's commendable. I was telling somebody the other day, or I know who I was telling it to, one of the brothers in my jurisdiction, but from another lodge. I was like, I was talking about Slaughter, the the brother named Slaughter from Louisiana, Ralph Slaughter, the Grand Master of the Prince Hall affiliated Grand Lodge of Louisiana. I was like, bro, like he his influence over PHA Masonry in Louisiana is uncontested. That's why he's able to maintain control over that jurisdiction, even though the majority of the Grand Masters of PHA Masonry in America are against him. They would love to remove him or get him out of office, but they can't do it. They could remove him from their council of Grand Masters. Sure, they could do that, but they don't want to try to deem him unrecognized overall, because they know that he has control over that state in terms of PHA in Louisiana. But I was explaining to the brother my jurisdiction, which is none of our business. I was just trying to illustrate a point dealing with the bullshit that happens in politics. And I'm like, the reason, like, he started his own Scottish Rite organization apart from the PHA usually recognized. It's funny how we got to use these types of terms. Don't think I'm illiterate, bro, when I use crazy terms. The PHA Scottish Rite jurisdiction that he was a part of, he basically he started his own thing because he discovered that they were embezzling money, the treasurer and other individuals, millions of dollars, not small money, big money. He discovered it, that's what was happening. And he realized that, okay, you don't want to expel this individual or get rid of them when you know that and this individual and these other cats are embezzling money. Oh, you don't want to kick them out? You just want to sweep it under the rug. So Ralph Slaughter, he broke away from that Scottish Rite group. It's a fact. It's a court case. Like, it's a civil case. But anyway, the point I'm making is I was explaining it to one of my brothers in my Masonic organization, but from a lodge apart from my lodge, a different lodge, but in my organization. He's like, damn, that shit is scandalous. So Brian from Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast is right about that type of thing. There's shade, and it's like, we're not perfect, man. Like humans. So don't fall for all of that shit. Like, everybody's stealing money and da da da, and this group is doing that, and this group is doing that. Learn for yourself. That's the point. And basically, that's it. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. This was the last part. I covered every single point that I wanted to talk about. So, with that being said, God bless you. God bless your family. I'm out of here on the square. The next episode that I'm going to do is going to deal with an esoteric Masonic subject. Rest assured of that. That's going to be my next episode. I'm going to do a few more episodes, and then I'm going to go on vacation for like 2 years, literally, something like that. So I won't be on YouTube. But within the next couple of days, I'm going to get back into esoteric Masonic subjects. And it's going to be pretty good. So leave your comments and stuff like that. Thanks to everybody who has subscribed. And that's that on the square.